Welcome to Unit 2, Level 1 video notes, where we will identify a digit's place value, and then we will perform single-step problems. It's going to be a little bit longer of a video, but there's a lot of information. All right, so our first example is about place value. And here we have ones. There's only one spot for the ones, tens, hundreds, thousands. The decimal point, and then we have tenths with the THS, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000ths, millionths, and so on. All right, so for our first example, we need to figure out what place value is the 4 in. All right, well, it's one spot after the decimal, so that would be the tenths. Now, if we were rounding to that place value, we would look to the right, 5 or above, we bump that 4 up to a 5. So we would write 36.5, and we don't need the 0 here because $36.50 or 5/10 is the same as 36 and 50 hundredths. Our next one, the 4 is 3 spots after the decimal, so we have tenths, hundredths, thousandths. And if we were rounding to that, we would look to the right of that number, 5 or above, we would shove that 4 up to a 5. So we have 9,623 and 125 thousandths. Next one, the 4 is in the hundred spot. And so when we round to that, we still look to the right, and that's a 9, so I'm going to shove that 4 up to a 5. And I can't just write 25 because that's not 25, or it's not in the 2000s anymore. So we do need 2 zeros for the place value. So this 2,495 is close to 2,500, rounded to the nearest 100. Next one, the 4 is one spot to the left, and that's in the ones. We look to the right, 3, 4 or below, we keep that 4 the same. So I'm going to keep it 854. I don't need the spots afterwards with the zeros because that's still 854. Percent means out of 100. So in middle school, when you filled in 17 squares out of the 10 by 10 grid, which is 100, you're representing 17 out of 100, which really is 17%. Now the decimal, if I did 17 divided by 100, it moves that decimal point 2 spots to the left. So if I'm going from percent to decimal, I can divide it out of 100 or just move the decimal spot 2 points to the left. And on the other hand, if I was going from the decimal to percent, that's the same as timesing by 100. So if I move the decimal to the right, I'm back at 17. All right, let's apply this. If I have 75%, well, percent means out of 100, so 75 out of 100. Now that can reduce by dividing by the greatest common factor of 25 to 3/4. And that decimal is 75 divided by 100, so 0.75. So going percent to decimal, I could have moved that decimal back 2 spots. And decimal to percent, I can always multiply by 100. All right. Next one, 26.5 out of 100. So that's 26.5%. You can divide this fraction out and we would get 0.265, or else we could have moved that decimal point back 2 spots, same as dividing by 100. All right, last one, 0.4 is our decimal. Well, that is 4/10, so that is a fraction, which reduces to 2/5. But if I want it out of 100, times that bottom by 10 and times the top by 10, I would get 40. 40 out of 100 is 40%. But we always could have just multiplied by 100 to get back to the percent. Fill in the decimal, that would be 40%. And 40% is 40 out of 100. If you divide any of these, you do get 0.4 as your decimal. You may have heard of the proportion is over of is percent out of 100. Well, that means if I change my 100 to a new total, what's that part out of that new total to represent the percent? So for our first example, 17%, well, that's 17 out of 100 squares, and that's this part of the proportion. Well, that equals what is, so that's our unknown, out of our new total 130. So if I increase the squares of 100 to 130 instead of 17, how many squares would be shaded out of that 130? So cross multiply, 100 times x is 100x. 17 times 130 is 2,210. Divide by 100, we get 22.1. This is how many squares out of 130 would be the same amount shaded 17 out of 100. So this fraction and this fraction now have the same value. Another way to solve this proportion would be to do a 17 divided by 100, which is 0.17. And now to isolate x, we'd have to undo dividing by 30 by timesing by 130. And whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. So if you did 0.17 times 130, that's finding 17% out of 130. And that's kind of here, 17%, well, 17 divided by 100, percent means out of 100. So this is 0.17, of means multiply in math, so times 130. Another way of thinking about that question. Next example. 95 is 17% of what number? So 17% is out of 100. And now we know we have 95 of those squares are shaded of what number? So we need to find out our new total where 95 squares are shaded instead of 17. So our new total is going to increase quite significantly because 17 to 95 does. All right, so 95 times 100 is 9,500, and 17 times x would be the other cross product. 9,500 divided by 17 is 558.82, and it's got a lot of decimals. So we would check to see what to round to and put that into Mobius. So that means that 95 out of 558.82 is equal to the same value as 17 divided by 100. So 0.17, and it's about that because we rounded, is equal to 0.17 here. Now, whenever you're given the top part of the proportion, the is part, I strongly encourage you not to look for a shortcut. Our last example, where 72 is what percent out of 63? Well, 72 is the part out of 63, and I'm looking for the percent. So it's kind of weird that 72 squares out of 63, that's more than the total. So out of 100 squares, that percent is going to be over 100 as well. So 63 times x is 63x. 72 times 100 is 7,200. Divide by 63, and we get 114.2. Instead of 8, I'm going to say 0.29 since the next number was 5 or above. So if I substitute that in for my percent, well, that divided by 100 is the same value as 72 divided by 63. And that was good. That was over 100 squares because 72 is over 63 squares. Now that is percent, so I am going to write my label. There is a shortcut to this one. So if we have 72 out of 63, well, we know that we need to find the percent. Divide 72 by 63 on the left side, and I get 1.14285. I'm going to take it out quite a bit, and that's equal to x out of 100 still. To isolate x, I would need to undo dividing by 100 by timesing by 100. Sorry, it's hard to see that in the green. So 1.14285 times 100 is equal to 114.2, I'd say 0.29, and that's percent again. So the shortcut is you can just divide the part to total and then times by 100 in the end. Let's apply these proportions to the real world. Susan got 75% on her test. If there were 24 questions, how many did she get correct? All right, well, 75% means 75 out of 100. And is 24 the part or the total? Well, 75% means how many she got correct out of 100. And we need to know how many she got correct. So how many did she get correct out of 24 instead of out of 100? So let's cross multiply. 75 times 24 is 1800. And that equals 100 times x. Divide by 100, we get x equals 18. So that means she's got 18 correct. And I would like to check my answers. 18 out of 24 is equal to 75 out of 100. If I divide 18 divided by 24, that is 0.75, and that is the decimal for 75 divided by 100. And the shortcut way from what I showed you earlier, 75% of 24, you could write 0.75 times 24. And that does give you 18 as well. So if you're ever looking for the part, you can do 75 divided by 100, that's this, and then times 24 to each side is that idea. This concludes level 1. Good luck on your homework.